So last week's material was looking at how we judge the ethics of a particular decision or action based upon the act or behaviour or decision itself. This week we're going to move away from that and look at a different way of judging the ethics of a decision or action by focusing on the actor or the agent or the person. Right? So the question it changes from what would be the ethical thing to do in terms of this decision or action to what would an ethical person do. So again, it's a subtle change, but it's focusing in on the person. So let's get in and have a look at those objectives. What we're going to be doing is looking at virtue ethics, the tradition of virtue ethics. In particular, we're going to look at Aristotle, who's a classic in the area. Now, it's like the others. There are several different approaches to virtue ethics, just as there are to utilitarianism and deontological approaches. We're focusing on the classics, which are kind of foundational. And we're going to show how this differs from utilitarian and deontological approaches. So remember, that is a way of judging things by focusing on the consequences versus the act itself, or our duty or obligation to act in a certain way. So again, the number one way we're going to look at it is virtue ethics. The second thing we're going to look at is Kohlberg's theory of moral development, which again focuses on the actor. Importantly though, this is really more of a descriptive approach to ethics. Remember, previously, in terms of deontological and utilitarian, we've been using normative approaches. And so we're going to diverge a little and look at a descriptive approach to ethics with Kohlberg's theory. And of course, what you need to be able to do is to apply them to different situations. One of the things we've seen so far is that we can judge ethics by the consequences or by the duty or obligation that we might have to uphold people's rights or to meet the categorical imperative. And we've seen that there's some advantages to that approach, but we've also seen that there's several disadvantages, and that really they probably don't cover every situation we could come across. And so what we're doing here is providing a kind of different tool for us in our arsenal of ethical thinking in order to assess what we should do and what the ethical or right thing to do is. So as we've discussed, we're focusing here on the agent rather than on the act or decision itself. The approach where you focused on the person is generally termed virtue ethics, right? Because it's about being a virtuous person. And there are three interrelated questions. We've got to ask ourselves, what's the good life? Because we all want to live a good life, right? So is a good life simply money? Is it being able to go out to the clubs and drink a lot, or maybe even dance at the discotheque? Okay, so we can look at what a good life is, and we've got to answer that. Or is a good life maybe one of discipline and self-control, right? Do they lead to what we would consider a person being a great person and living a very good life? Okay, so in order to get a good life, you need to work out what kind of person you want to become. Okay? And if you become this kind of person, you will lead a good life. And when we're answering those questions, we want to be able to think about, well, how do I actually go about doing it? How do I actually do this? Yeah? It's all easy to talk about it, but what do I need to do? And that's the focus of virtue ethics. So virtue ethics goes back to the ancient Greeks, particularly Plato and Aristotle, and we're going to look at four components of Aristotle's approach. First, we've got to work out the idea of function, or what something's meant to do, so it's function. The goals when you have that function, and what a good function is. Okay, how do we know that something is very functional? The second thing we've got to look at is the idea of flourishing. I don't know what another word for it, succeeding, or if you're a Charlie Sheen fan from a long time ago, winning, but probably not is winning. Anyway, flourishing means you're living the good life. Okay, what virtues allow you to attain the flourishing, and then how do you develop those virtues? So hopefully you can see these are related to the three questions, right? We have some foundational knowledge that we need. We need to understand the concepts of function, goals, and the good. Then we need to work out what is leading a good life, what is flourishing. Then we need to understand what virtues or excellences will allow us to flourish, and then how do we develop those virtues? They answer those three key questions that we had on the last slide. And in the next video, we'll begin looking at that by looking at the first step there and getting through those definitions of functions, goals, and the good.